So firstly, thank you so much to the Children's Rights Alliance, particularly to Hilary, for organising today and for asking for Early Childhood Ireland to contribute on how we can together develop and enhance the capacity of early childhood care and education to meet the needs of refugee and asylum seeking children, or as I've learned today, children with a refugee background. That's Sybil was saying this morning, so I'm going to be using that. So my name is Milica Atanckovic. Most people call me Millie. I work as a manager on, we've actually changed our name as of last week, on the Research and Professional Learning team in Early Childhood Ireland. So just to take you through, just to give a little bit of a structure of what I'll be talking about. So I'm going to be talking about ASHTR, and I'm going to be talking about ASHTR as an emergent and inquiry-based curriculum framework. And the reason I'm speaking about ASHTR is because it is generally accepted across the sector that ASHTR serves as an excellent framework that can guide both curriculum development and the quality of service provision. And it's a framework that allows for multiple structures, including family settings, daycare, indoor-outdoor settings, and so on. It cannot be overemphasised how the use of the ASHTR framework supports educators to plan and to provide enjoyable, supportive, and appropriate experiences to enable all children to grow and develop as competent and confident learners. So using ASHTR builds capacity. So today I'm going to speak a little bit about play, on transitions and partnerships, and then I'm going to take you through a summer programme in a setting in Kildare called Wigwams. And my colleague Debbie Mullen, who's in the audience today, and Julie McNamara from Kildare County Childcare Committee worked with Geraldine Delahunt, the manager, and the team in Wigwams to demonstrate how ASHTR can be used effectively to support children during their time in a setting. So I went through this presentation with my daughter last night. Well, I got through one slide of it, and she encouraged me to play this video at the beginning. So the video is actually just an example of ASHTR in action, and it was a video that really showed the importance of play and how play is universal and that every single child has a right to play. And it's so important that we are conscious of children coming into our settings, where they've come from, what they may have lost, and how we need to best support their needs. So the UNHCR in 2007 reported that 12 million children under the age of 8 are displaced. And research shows that nurturing care, including a focus on early learning, is critical to help mitigate the negative effects of adverse childhood experiences. And as Carl Rogers said, we must support every human's drive to be well, to identify and belong with the most important people in their lives, to be the best that they can be. So I'm going to show a video of Geraldine Delahunt, and I'm going to go into more detail of the programme further on in the slides, but this is just a short clip where Geraldine talks about her image of the child, and I'm just going to play for you now. So Geraldine makes links between what ASHTR tells us. And ASHTR tells us that the child is capable, competent, and an active learner. And supporting the image is the identification of play and relationships as the two primary contexts of learning. So the video that I wasn't able to play talked about at the beginning really showed the importance of play, but it's also about those relationships. And ASHTR is an effective and relevant framework, but it's the people that implement it that bring it to life. And it's really dependent, and Colette spoke about this, it's really dependent on educators that understand the needs of children and their image of each child. So it's really important to remember that as children become part of new communities or early childhood education and care settings, we must remember that they do not do this in isolation. They have their own unique history and their own unique context. And we know that it is with family that children first develop their sense of belonging, well-being and identity. And by positioning early childhood education and care settings as hubs of support for all children and their families, and through complementing the care and education children receive from their family, educators will strengthen families. So ASHTR supports the child's holistic sense of well-being, identity and belonging. ASHTR is well-researched, evidence-based framework that can make major contributions to the development of early childhood care and education in this country. And the framework highlights the critical importance of the first few years of these journeys and the need for children to have rich and varied experiences from which they can learn and develop. The framework also highlights the important role adults play in nurturing and extending this learning and development. So ASHTR supports the idea of encounter and emergence. So a curriculum that is unique to each child, unique to their encounters with the world, with people and society. And emergent, a curriculum that emerges from the experiences of children, the development of their sense of self and identity, and the development of children in community. So the themes of ASHTR should be seen as experiences that are part of all encounters and relevant to all. So communicating, well-being, identity and belonging, exploring and thinking. So we've established the idea of a framework as a way of ensuring that we have shared principles, aims and objectives within the early childhood education sector. But it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. A framework recognises that methods and activities and content will emerge with the context and the interests of the group. And with very young children, nothing is as important as the environment we create, the physical and emotional environment, the relationships we create and the ways we respond to children in the moment. The central most important practice in every setting is responding to children in the moment, building their sense of belonging with a reassuring nod, a supportive smile, an open hand. And that is what early childhood education and care is all about, and why care and education are inextricable. So play. And coming from Early Childhood Ireland and those that know the work of our organisation, we are so passionate about the importance of play. And ASHTR tells us that engaging in play is good for children's health and well-being, is a way of creating community so that children develop a sense of identity and belonging, and it's a way of communicating and exploring and thinking. And these, ASHTR tells us, are the most important learning outcomes in early childhood. And it's always important to remember that ASHTR is process, not outcomes focused. The themes speak to the process of children's real and play-based encounters with the world and their feelings. It builds children's competencies by viewing children as active co-constructors, and we need to see all children in the same way. And we need to focus and be focused on what is happening in play for children so that we can learn to value it. And when we do this, we can then enrich it. This involves slowing down, being in the moment, and wallowing in children's own play with them. Transitions. So Fabian tells us that transitions are a change process. And ASHTR highlights the importance of transitions and engaging families. Responsive and reciprocal relationships are key, and partnerships are key. And when we think about refugee and asylum-seeking children and their families, our primary focus must be on building relationships and supporting smooth transitions, but we must also understand the impact of the transition. Harold Hislop reminds us that transitions are not a point in time, they are a process. And Schlossberg, excuse my pronunciation, also tells us that individuals differ in their ability to adapt, to change. Transitions involve the process of moving in, moving through, and moving out. And again, complementing the themes of Ashter and the idea of encounter and emergence. So partnerships are key. Of course, we need to talk to parents about our settings, about what we hope children will experience and learn, about the routines of their days with us, about how we can all work together. The kind of partnership, and this is the kind of partnership that builds relationships and helps to build community around children. That must be our main motivation in communicating with families to support them. We want to give families some insight into the encounters that children experience in our settings and the impact of these encounters, but we need to keep it real. So this is where I'm going to show you an example of real life and practice. So, when the government announced plans to resettle refugee families into an orientation centre in Kildare, it was planned that families would be staying there for 3 to 4 months before they were resettled into other parts of Ireland. And Early Childhood Ireland, in collaboration with Kildare CCC, wanted to be involved and support children with having access to an early childhood education and care setting in those months. So Wigwams and Geraldine, she was contacted and was asked to be involved. And Wigwams is located in Kildare. And they were already using the Ashter framework to plan their environment and plan meaningful activities and experiences for children. And Geraldine talked about how, you know, it is so important to enable children to be the best that they can be. And it was really about providing, the other speakers this morning, Marlies spoke about creating really safe spaces for children and supporting children to have access to play environments. And Wigwams has a really large outdoor area, which is fantastic for families who are coming from spaces that are very small. So it was a really good space that they could engage in. So sorry, just to talk you through this slide. So again, around the safe and secure environment and physically and emotionally speaks to our themes of Ashter around communicating and well-being. And friendship bracelets they worked on making friendship bracelets to show unity between Ireland and their country. So the summer programme, it was a 6 to 8 week programme. Geraldine was supported by Debbie Mullen from Early Childhood Ireland and Julie McNamara from Kildare CCC. And they carried out a piece of research on this programme. And Geraldine went first to the orientation centre to register the children with the families, and she had an interpreter with her. And Geraldine was able to then explain the outline of the programme to the parents so that they were very aware of what was happening for their child and what their child would be doing during that time. A bus was funded to collect the children every morning and then drop them back. And Geraldine's team really started to recognise that the more time they spent with the children and when they arrived and got to know them and got to know their interests and got to know their families, their background, and the more they started to really tune into them and listen to their voice, the better experiences the children had during their time in the setting. So again, I suppose one of the barriers, language was a barrier. So Geraldine left a notice board in the reception area of the orientation centre, and she added photos with parents' permission to show visual stories of what the children were doing during the day, and she updated that daily so that every child and every family was represented, so every family could see what their child was doing. It was a really great way to build partnership, particularly when language is such a barrier in those situations. And the Ashter framework supported the image of the child, and the activities then were built for those team meetings. So Geraldine would have team meetings, and there were opportunities to then reflect, sort of linking back a bit, Colette, to the importance, I suppose, of that image of the child and the prejudices that were coming with that, you know, we all have them, but it was around really understanding the needs of the families, the needs of the children, reflecting on that together if there was challenges, and that was really helpful. Also part of this research that Debbie was involved in is they used the Fair Lavers Laven scale, and that was used by the educators to observe the children. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with the tool, but basically the two central indicators of quality early years provision are children's well-being and involvement. So it determined that before educators can plan to learn, they need to determine what the children are experiencing and need to ask themselves, how are children feeling, their well-being, how engaged they are in activities and their involvement. So that was also part of a lot of discussions with the team at team meetings and going back, and it was part of, you know, really looking at their well-being and their sense of well-being. So some of the findings from this programme were educators observed children's well-being and involvement increased to different levels during a very short period of time. And they thought that was really particularly because of the outdoor environment. It was very well resourced. And also the educators were very competent. You know, they really knew ASHA, they knew how to implement it, and they worked really hard in supporting the needs of the families and the children. And through the process, they learned to take the perspective of the child in their approach. And because of this, we're able to create optimal conditions for the social and cognitive development of children. So ASHA is sufficient when used by competent practitioners to meet the learning needs of all children in early childhood care and education settings. Colette might argue with me there. That's for, that's for later. But this programme definitely did highlight the importance for high quality CPD in ASHTR. It also suggested creating opportunities for training in the Laven scales so that children can continue to have quality experiences while supporting emotional well-being and involvement. And, you know, the focus for educators should be to trust the themes of ASHTR, to trust their professionalism and their ability to respond to the context of the group they are supporting. And I suppose it's important to link back to those presentations this morning as well, you know, and what Imelda was saying, when you come from a background where you've worked with children, you're passionate about working with children, you actually have these skill sets, and it's about adapting those. And that's not to say that there isn't other levels of supports that are needed in terms of dealing with children that are coming from trauma and other situations, but the ASHTR as a framework is a really great place to start to build those competencies even further. And we really need to be tuning into each child and trust in their drive to learn and trust in their drive to flourish. Debbie Mullen, my colleague, was very inspired by the research she carried out in Wigwams with Julie McNamara. And I really always remember her saying, she said, Millie, it's so important that children have opportunities to play, but we really need to create opportunities for children to play with their families. And we really need to ensure that our settings and our environments are open, and that we really need to ensure that we're building those partnerships. She was really speaking to the therapeutic benefits of play, and I think it's also worth remembering again that we need to focus on relationships, we need to focus on transitions, building relationships with children and their families, and building community around children and around family, so that children can belong, so that they can be, and so that they can become all the way through life.